Hello and welcome to God's Minute. I'm Pastor Jonathan Conrad. I'm the senior pastor at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Wilmington, North Carolina, and I appreciate you joining me today as we continue our Bible study to First John, John's first letter that we can find in the New Testament. And it's a wonderful letter, only 5 chapters, so I urge you to read through this letter several times during the week, and each time you're going to find something a little different, something to hold on to, a little morsel of truth and strength that I think will get you through this pandemic time. And speaking of that little morsel, let's go straight to our verse today, which comes from First John chapter 3. We know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. So this week we've been talking about abide, and each letter in abide will stand for another word. We've talked about atonement and beloved, and today for I, we get the fancy word incarnate. Yes, incarnate. Now, that probably doesn't mean a lot to many of you. And when I was young, it didn't mean anything to me too. In fact, whenever I saw the word incarnate, I thought of carnation instant breakfast, which brought, well, let's just say my mom and dad were not very happy when I would use carnation instead of incarnate whenever we got to the creeds. And they let me know about that. But over time, I did learn what incarnate means and why it's so important that we as Christians believe and in an incarnate God. Well, incarnate means to have a human body. And we believe that Jesus was fully human. And what does that mean for us? Why would that matter? Well, prior to Jesus, there was a belief that God was very distant. Throughout the Old Testament, people believed that God was far off, that God was not near, that the only way you could connect with God was being a God believer. You would go to Jerusalem at least 3 times a year so that you could go to the temple and speak to God in God's house. But what that also did is that it alienated a lot of people. When people felt distant from God, they felt they were distant because God didn't want to be with them. And that really affected people who were called sinners and traitors, or people who were not worthy of God's attention, or at least that's what people would tell them. So, what was important is that Jesus, incarnate God, appears. And look who Jesus goes and spends time with. Look at who Jesus talks to: the sinners, the prostitutes, the tax collectors, the poor, the sick, the lame, the children. This is who the incarnate God spoke to and spent time with. And what that means is that God was not distant, that God was right there in their midst. And it also meant that God had their full attention. And God has that same quality with us. We have God's attention. God is with us during a pandemic, during the lows that we are experiencing, and during those times of trial and tribulation that we are going through. God is with us. You can see the God incarnate in the people in your lives, those who say, I love you, those who have reached out to you. And maybe for those of you who are suffering or who are in need, maybe you see God incarnate working through the people who are providing you food and assistance and clothing. Just think of the ways that God has provided for you and the people that are doing it. That is God at work. That is God incarnate. And so it's very important for us to know that we have God's attention. The question I have for you is, does God have your attention? Does God get your time of day? Now, I'm not asking this to make you feel bad. I'm asking it to challenge you and invite you to give God your full attention. And you can do that during this time by Bible study. Like I said, read First John several times this week, and then read your Bible. Also, pray constantly. Pray in the morning, in the afternoon, and evening. Have your conversations with God. You can also show that God has your attention by the way you treat others. Thank the people that are around you. Say you love them. Say that you care for them and that you appreciate all that they have given you. These are just some of the ways that you can show God that God has your attention. It's very important because God is ready to give us love and show us love. And I think we need to be ready to show that love back. Thank you very much for joining me today. I appreciate it. And I hope to see you tomorrow for another edition of God's Minute.